I love Polarstar F2s. This is probably an engine that I install more than any other engine, probably next to the Polarstar Kythera. And one of the most common mistakes I see when people install these engines, or any engine themselves, is they just throw it in the gearbox shell and close it up. And then when it's all said and done, their engine is actually able to kind of slop around. And in some other cases, I see some other people that have installed these have used like electrical tape or Teflon tape or any type of tape to basically wrap it around here just to prevent that engine from moving. And I think it's kind of a sloppy fix, to be honest with you. I don't think it's very permanent, and you know, it does leave like a sticky residue behind. I think it's kind of gross. The traditional way to kind of prevent this engine from moving around, it's a solution offered by Polarstar, and it's their shims. They come in two sizes, 0.157 inches and 0.152 inches. That refers to the inner diameter of these little cylindrical shims, and that's to match the diameter of the cylinder head pegs on most commonly available gearbox shells. In the case of a VFC spec shell, you're going to end up using the 0.157 inch 99% of the time. Now, with the F2, there are some issues I've encountered while running these. One of those issues being that the hole in the engine itself is actually deeper than these shims are tall. So sometimes this will get pushed all the way into the hole in the front of the engine to the point where it's no longer grabbing onto this cylinder head peg, and it's almost like not having them installed at all, and you still got slop. You can kind of fix that by gluing them in place, but I personally don't prefer doing that. There's another solution. So here's my shim kit for the F2. This is a brace that goes on the back of the engine, and it's shimmable. So essentially, instead of using the cylinder head pegs, we're actually using the back of the cylinder window and the front flat face of the shell as points of constraint. And we can either add to the front or add to the back. So not only can we constrain the engine, but we can hold it in exactly the right space we need it to be. In the case of this build I'm doing right now, I have an M4G hop-up from Max, and pretty much all these new Max hop-ups have removable and shimmable inlet adapters. So that alone will do a great job at letting you tune the position of your hop-up chamber. So in that case, it really doesn't matter what the position of your engine is, because this will kind of compensate for that. But if you're using the stock hop-up chamber, or a Crytek hop-up, or a RetroArms hop-up, or a Pro-In, or you name it, you don't have that ability. So the distance between where this mesh is flush with your gearbox shell and where the hop-up bucking sits, that's kind of fixed by the dimensions and tolerances of that hop-up chamber. So when you're doing builds and you find that the solution that works most of the time isn't quite doing it for the one build you're doing, it doesn't have to be a VFC M4, you'll run into the least problems on this platform. Let's say it's a featherweight M249, or let's say it's a weird AK platform, or let's say it's like an M4, but it's a different brand and their dimensions are very different in here, or it's like a featherweight M249. It's very likely the case that you're going to want to use this amount of play that you have to really choose the position that you're constraining the engine, so you can take advantage of the fact that by a millimeter or so, you can have the full extended length of the nozzle be a little bit shorter or a little bit longer. And that's something that you're going to tune as you do the build yourself, because you're the tech and it's your discretion, and you should be left to that. So this kit includes this brace, and it includes a bag of very thin shims, front and rear, and some slightly thicker shims, front and rear. So the way that I'm going to kind of go about this is I always start with the front shims. What I don't want is I don't want to overextend the nozzle, because I don't want to chamber BBs too deep into this hop-up chamber, or any hop-up chamber, because I want the lip of the bucking to still be retaining the BB a little bit prior to the air coming out to shoot it out. Otherwise, you'll have BBs rolling down the barrel, especially in closed bolt mode, which is not a good time. So I'll start by adding a front shim, and I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to press him all the way up there, and I'm going to blow down the barrel and see if I still have an air seal. So with that thick front shim on there, I still have a good air seal, and honestly, using this shim, it's probably placing this engine in the same spot that it would place it if I were to use these brass shims. Now, again, for VFC M4, it's a really safe bet that Polarstar products will drop in very seamlessly with all of Polarstar's solutions to get everything in and tuned properly. But you might not always be working on a VFC M4. This just happens to be what I'm working on right now, so this is going to be what I use for a demonstration. So after checking air seal, I'm going to take a BB. I'm going to turn my hop up all the way down. I'm going to drop a BB in there, and I'm going to press that BB in with the nozzle. And then and that came right out. It's kind of a good sign. And what I really want to see is, where did it put that BB in the chamber? Am I okay with that head spacing? Did it just completely roll through because I didn't have enough retention on the bucking? These are the things that I'm checking for. I'm going to push that BB through and feel how much retention is left. And I think that's good. I try to keep the nozzle backed out as much as I can, generally, while still maintaining a full air seal, which again is something you kind of have to get down there and kind of blow down the end of the barrel to check that air seal. It's the best test I've found so far. Or I guess you could put air through it and you can shoot it and plug the end of the barrel and see if anything leaks out. So after putting the front shim on there, there's still some play here. So now I'm going to take a look at this whole bracket in the back. And this is a really simple solution. It doesn't have any extra hardware. It really is its own thing. It just kind of goes on there. And it's just a brace for the front and the back. And we still have some play. So it looks like I'm going to add some rear shims. I'm going to start with some thick shims. And then if it turns out that one more thick shim is too thick, then I'm going to go with the thin shim. So these are about 0.2 millimeters, and the thinner ones are about 0.1. So we added a 0.2 millimeter shim on the back, and these kits will come with more than enough shims so that you can get this done in whatever weird, quirky build you're working on. You might not be using the same amount of shims for every single build. There's still some back and forth there. And once I start getting closer, what I'm actually going to do is close the gearbox shell on the engine with the shims in. I want to make sure that I can still close the shell. That can be one of the tricky parts of this. And then when I know that I can close the shell after it's closed, I'm going to check it again. I'm going to see if the engine is constrained. I'm not fully committing with screws yet because it'd be a waste of time to put those screws in because this is totally too loose. We need another shim. And right there, when it gets a little tricky to get it through the cylinder window. Right now it's not butted up against that flat surface. I'm having a hard time getting it in, so that tells me that that last shim is a little bit too much. So let us just remove that last thick one and replace it with a thin one. Just by feeling these, it's very obvious to tell which one's the thin one and which one's the thick one. The thin ones are very thin. All right, we're going to try to close this shell on this. And here we still got a little bit of play. So if the one thick one didn't work, maybe two of those thin ones might be too much too. It might equate to just one of those thick ones, but we'll just try it out. These being 3D printed, there's definitely some tolerances between these sizes. So you can kind of play with those tolerances, use it to your advantage to find that sweet spot. That's why I include so much. Right now it's hard to close. Which is actually a good sign, but we can get it closed. And that engine is now not moving back and forth. So now I know which shims I'm going to use and how I need to have them set. I can keep all these other ones as extra for my next F2 build. Can never have too many small shims like that. And now there's no harm in just closing this guy up and testing that air seal a little bit more thoroughly. Making sure I truly have those distances correct. We're going to use 3 hands. It's That's the Airsoft Tech's finishing move. It's called 3 hands. It's what allows us to close gearbox shells. All right, and that engine is not moving anywhere. I can look down here and just check the alignment. The shim itself might be misaligned, but don't let that deceive you. Try to really carefully see if it's that nozzle that might be off center. Right now we're looking good. Pop another BB in there. Press that all the way up against that hop-up. Take a look at that hop-up chamber. That BB's where I want it. Just like that. Now I can check that air seal. No air loss there. Again, if I was having an issue with that, I would just shim the inlet adapter on this hop-up chamber. But again, you might not be dealing with that. You might be doing an M249 HPA build, and there's nothing you can do to change the distance between where this mates with the gearbox and where that bucking ends up. It's supposed to be a very versatile solution for a wide range of different gearbox shells, as long as you're installing an F2. Oh, that's retaining an air seal. Cool. Still have a good air seal. I'm happy with the head spacing. That's pretty much it. That's that shim kit. There you go. Available at AntTechAirsoft.com and perhaps some retailers near you.